The Israeli military is preparing for another round of protests on the Gaza border, which continue despite what looks like headway around reaching some kind of a settlement between the two sides. Egypt and the United Nations are working hard to broker a deal, but the latest uptick in violence from Gaza producing exasperated rhetoric coming from both parties. The UN and Qatar had begun sending some $60 million worth of Israeli fuel into the Strip, a deal that bypassed Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who's been imposing severe sanctions on Gaza for years. Now that fuel has been stopped by Israel in response to the latest rocket fire from Gaza. Meantime, we're looking back to October 18, 7 years ago, when Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit was released from Hamas captivity. That coming after a prisoner swap deal that did go through between the two sides. One of those prisoners, Yahya Sinwar, who's currently the supreme political leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the commander of its military wing. I'm joined in studio by Head of Citizens for Promotion of True Leadership, retired Major General Yom-Tov Samir, who is the former head of the IDF Southern Command. Mr. Samir, a pleasure.
Hi, pleasure. Good evening to you.
Now, it's often said there's no solution to this conflict, only a way of maintaining it so that it doesn't escalate into war. How long can that status quo hold for?
Okay. Looking into the whole picture, I think we, Israel, and mainly the whole world are missing the main point. The main point is Hamas is a terror organization. Hamas is holding 2.2 million Palestinians as prisoners inside Gaza. Hamas is the side who is doing all the curfew or closure, whatever you want to call it. So we are missing that point to explain the world that the Hamas is a terror organization. This is one side. The other side of the equation is we will not have, both sides, the Palestinians and Israelis, we will not have any kind of agreement, I mean between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. At the end of the day, you call it whatever you want, two-state solution, confederation with Jordan, autonomy. I'm not talking about what's the solution, but any kind of solution between Israel and the Palestinian Authority will not be on the table, or no one will achieve any agreement as long as the Hamas is controlling the Gaza Strip. Because otherwise we're talking about three-state solutions, or even more.
But in terms of the violence on the Israel-Gaza border, we're hearing a lot more about whether it be direct or indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas than any kind of conversation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. That's led to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas blaming this recent rocket fire attack on the Palestinian Authority.
That's the whole point. I'm against any kind of negotiation with Hamas. Any kind.
So we're hearing
except for one issue, which Mrs. Golden mentioned before, which usually made right after any round of war to exchange prisoner of wars. This is the only situation that we need the United Nations or any other third party to solve this human being issue. On all the others, no talk with the Hamas. I don't believe in these arrangements, or what we call here asdara. With whom the hell? With whom you're going to do arrangements? With Hamas, who wants it as hudna? Hudna in Arabic is I'm weak now, you are strong. Please let's stop for a few years. Once I will be stronger, I'll come back to fight against you. This is Udna, and that's what Hamas wants.
We're hearing from the Israeli leadership, from Benjamin Netanyahu, from Avigdor Lieberman, that it's time to deliver a harsh blow to Hamas. Is that empty rhetoric? Is that empty words? I'm
sorry to say such words about my Prime Minister and my Minister of Defense. Yes, it's an empty word. Since where have you been for the last 6 months? Hey, it didn't start yesterday. It started 6 months ago.
So what do you do differently?
What do I do differently? Well, we have to go back to 2008 to answer that.
Okay, but we're now in 2018.
In the last 3 rounds, the military didn't have clear goals of the round or the war or the operation, call it whatever you want. I was in reserve at that time, so I know exactly what were the goals that the government declared internally to the army and publicly to the public. As long as the goals will not be clear-cut, vanish the Hamas from the Gaza Strip, we will have a 4th round, a 5th round, a 6th round.
What does that mean? What does that actually mean in practicality to vanish Hamas from the Gaza Strip?
First of all, we need 3 different vectors to do it. The first one is diplomatic, great pressure from all the world. The second is economics, okay? Control the economy. If Hamas is a state with Gaza, let's fight Hamas and their citizens by the economy. And the third one, the last one and the third is army, the army part.
What happens the day after a war with Gaza, though, using those 3
We'll
vectors?
Bring the Palestinian Authority back to Gaza. They should control the Gaza Strip as it was before 2005. Okay? The world should understand, Israel don't have any boots on the ground in Gaza Strip. We don't have any boot on the ground in Gaza Strip. We have left Gaza in 2005, the whole army and the whole 18 or 19 settlements that were there. We have nothing inside Gaza Strip. You want to live a great life? You want a startup nation in Gaza? You want electricity 24 hours? You want economy? You want agriculture? Act as someone who wants it. You know that 70% of the goods that are going into Gaza every day are controlled by Hamas and going direct to their military forces, not to the civilian. 70%. Israel budget defense is 7%.
Now, Israel, of course, as you're talking to in terms of the defence budget, has the upper hand militarily. So how is Hamas a threat to Israel?
It's a very good question. Hamas is not a threat for Israel. The threat for Israel is the Israeli way of action, unfortunately. But again, Hamas...
What do you mean by that, the Israeli way of action? If Hamas is not a direct threat to Israel...
But by not declaring the main goal of any round that we are going to.
But why does Hamas need to be wiped out if it's not a direct threat?
We are going to another round with Gaza against the Hamas. And the goals of the operation to the army will not be clear. You have to vanish the Hamas from Gaza.
Why does Israel need to vanish Hamas from Gaza? How is it a threat to Israel?
Because it's the only way to avoid the next round. And the next round after that. Otherwise, we are going to have another 30 years because the Hamas target is to vanish Israel. That's clear. Why they can have such a target and all the world clapping its hands and we cannot have the same.
Would you see it like that? More of a nuisance than a threat? Something that Israel has to keep at bay rather than to combat in some, I suppose, full-fledged war?
If the main goal will be to vanish Hamas from the Gaza Strip, it's worth it. If not, let's stay the same.